welcome to this special edition of the Urban Debate. I'm Avni Raja and continuing with our coverage of the big announcements, the booster shot for our economy, if I can call it that came from the Finance Minister just a short while back. Not only has the government acknowledged the seriousness of the economic slowdown, but has heard the voices of the distressed sectors, from the auto industry to public sector banks to financial markets to the small and medium enterprises. Across the board, measures were announced. And it's not the end of it. Finance Minister has said that more announcements can be expected next week. Not just that, the Finance Minister also made several assurances. And I want to focus on some of these promises that the Finance Minister made, because a lot of these are issues that have been brought up time and again from corporate India. So let's just look at some of those promises. The first promise was that there will be no income tax department officer who will harass taxpayers. The second promise, faceless scrutiny from October onwards. Now, these are important because tax harassment due to tax issues has been one big concern that has been raised across the board, from small taxpayers all the way to corporate India as well. Now, promise number 3, notices, summons, letters will only be through a centralized system. Again, here there can be no victimization, nobody can be targeted specifically, it will all be through a centralized system. The fourth promise was that notices will be disposed of within 3 months from the date of reply. Now, why is this important? Because this means that notices that are sent cannot carry on for years, and these cases cannot remain open for years. It has to be dealt with in a time-bound manner. And finally, promise number 5, that the government has made it very clear that they are choosing penalty over punishment. The focus will be on penalizing people whenever, as and when required, whenever people are needed, instead of punishing them. And one example of that is the move of corporate social responsibility, which will not be treated criminally anymore, but it will be treated only as a civil matter when companies don't adhere to their corporate social responsibility targets. But the big question is, will all of these announcements address the root cause of the economic slowdown? Have the fears and concerns of people, of industry, has all of that been addressed by what was announced by the Finance Minister? Let's in fact listen in to some of the important points that she mentioned.
To mitigate genuine difficulties of startups and their investors, it has been decided that Section 56(2)(b) of the Income Tax Act shall not be applicable to a startup registered with DPIIT. Relief from enhanced surcharge on long-term and short-term capital gains. In order to encourage investment in the capital market, it has been decided to withdraw the enhanced surcharge levied by the Finance No. 2 Act of 2019, the recent budget time. So BS4 vehicles which are purchased up to 2020 March will all remain operational for their entire period of registration. So it's not as if from 2020 BS4 vehicles are all off the road, not at all. As long as their registration is on, they will be allowed and they will be as good as any other vehicle. Summons, letters, etc. shall now go through a centralized system. What does that actually mean? It means on or after 1st October 2019, all notices, summons, orders, etc. by the income tax authorities shall be issued through a centralized computer system, and it will contain computer-generated unique documentation identification number. If there is a notice being issued at the ground level and some amount is being claimed on an SSC, that without a central approval cannot happen, and also the amount stated there will eventually either be resolved or resolved in favor of the authorities, and therefore the tax will be paid or the claim will be settled, but the amount shall be what was claimed and not more or less.
Before we continue this discussion with the rest of the panel who's joining me tonight, let's also listen in to what K. Raghunathan, the former national president of All India Manufacturers Organization, had to say about this.
As far as MSME is concerned, we would have been happier if the minimum, any law enforcement is applicable to companies which are having above 100 laborers. I think then it would have been made more ease of doing business for the people. Today the concern is how to make profit. Not after you make profit, how to save you from taxations. The CSR violations, CSR comes when? Only from the profit what you make. If there is no profit, where is CSR? Now, the same way, surcharge removal on capital gains come when? Only when you gain capital. When there is no capital gains, where is the surcharge? So, I think the address today, what is needed is how to make enterprises make profits. We were largely expecting her to announce that all the outstanding dues of the government payable to MSMEs would be cleared in 30 days, not just GST refunds. Even the payments for MSME must have been released. There are several companies who have supplied materials to the government, but they have not got the payments even for the last 6 months. State or central, doesn't matter. But we should have released it. We are expecting a lot more relaxation to come. Currently, we are admitted into a ICU. The doctors are surrounding us and giving us the feel of comfortness that they will take care of us. And we have been given certain amount of assurances by the doctors that all will be well shortly. We believe that. We respect that. We welcome that. Now we are expecting them to do operations. After the operation, nurturing us and then healthily sending us out of the ICU.
All right, let me in fact welcome my panel who's joining me this evening. We've got Professor Aman Agarwal, Director in the Indian Institute of Finance. We'll have Abhishek Mishra of the BJP joining in just a bit. R. Nagaraj, Professor IGIDR, is also joining in. And we'll also have Govindraj Yatiraj, a senior journalist, as well as Ajay Baga, a market expert who will be joining us, and Anjan Roy, senior economist as well. Thank you to all of you for joining us. Professor Aman Agarwal, let me come to you first. You know, your first reactions as far as what was announced today by the finance minister across sectors, because a lot of the points that were made were a rollback of what was announced in the budget itself.
You're correct, but you see, that's what I've been voicing for quite some time, and especially I iterated yesterday also. Amongst the measures which the government needs to take, apart from fiscal and monetary measures, the more key concern area is the administrative measures which need to be taken. And that's very critical because it is excessive regulations which is creating this problem. And I'm happy that actually at least a beginning of addressing the problem by taking an action on the administrative measures so that things could reach the people at the end of the day is there. Like the CSR, you know, there was a criminal proceeding which came into fear, and large number of corporates were in dilemma in the last 1 week or so of the kind of announcement which had come forth. Now, there is certainly, it's not that you are scot-free if you have not used the fund, but at least there is some relief that there will be not criminal proceeds. Similarly, in terms of taxes going to people, whether it is GST, because I have had interactions with a large number of MSMEs which are facing this problem of saying that we pay the GST today, but when we get our money from the ex party, which may be 3 months, 6 months, maybe even longer, so that's when we get our GST. So how do we go about financing our GST had been a critical issue. At least she's put a bar that within 30 days you need to clear it off, and anything which is going further needs to be cleared off within 60 days itself. Now, these are some of the steps. She's also put the fact that the concern which was raised, and we saw with the CCD case where there was an issue raised about tax authorities being scavengers as against watchdogs, had come into play. She's put an end to that story as well, saying that it will be centrally regulated. We are still yet to see what happens, because she did not make it clear as to what will be the way or mechanism which will be used. If she only made it, instead of a manual intervention, into a clearly computerized system, which does not really bring out much to say as to what will be the stand, because if the computer says there is a tax liability and you have no one to approach, that's one of the biggest problems with the online system which is coming forth. And I know professors who have had this problem in our institution, where they're actually not able to, even if filing a revised return or filing a compliance, they're not able to get their refunds. Now, these are some things which technology cannot help with. Certainly, it can help reduce that component which was being talked about in the CCD case, but it cannot really help do away with the kind of injustice which at times the tax authorities put and people at.
Right. All right.
So, in my opinion, this is a very welcome step. It will help boost up certain things. Even the fact that the banks have been flushed, they said that 70,000 crores will go directly. She's also talked about the fact the NBFC sector, which was in complexion, that there would be transfer of funds, there will be some part of equity which will be taken up. That will help resolve the financial issues which are coming in. And the directive which has been given very strongly now again, apart from the RBI governor, which Shakti Kant did earlier this week, she has also come out and said the banks need to pass on the framework, the repo rate is to be adhered to, the others need to be adhered to, and I think that's a very strong message to the banking industry, taking into account they have been, and the fact that she acknowledged the fact that there have been lags, and not only the people are saying it, but she is accepting and acknowledging this fact, clearly brings forth the fact that the government is seriously concerned about the problems of this country and the people of this country.
Absolutely. Let's get in our other voices as well. Professor Nagaraj, your perspective, before we get into the specifics, from an overall view, from an economist's perspective, how much do you think this is going to play a role in really addressing the root cause of the issue, the root cause of the slowdown that we are facing, the fact that we are still vulnerable to a lot of what's happening globally? How do you think all these measures are going to play out?
Okay. Thank you. I think this is a welcome step, but how much it will help the economy to get back to a faster growth is still not clear. How much of the relief which the finance minister is claiming will actually reach the industrialists or the loan takers is yet to be seen. So, but I think these are welcome steps. But one must understand that we can recapitalize banks. Banks may be willing to lend, but there must also be demand for it. The economy is faced with lack of aggregate demand. There is not enough people are asking for goods and services. People do not have money in their pockets. And this is especially true in rural economy where poverty has increased. Therefore, I think we must think of increasing aggregate demand. The credit makes availability credit improves the ability of borrowers to borrow. But that doesn't take care of the problem of demand. So therefore, unless there is direct injection of demand into the economy, I think the effect of these measures are likely to take a much longer time to play itself out. Therefore, I think if the economy needs to be boosted up very quickly, what needs to be done is fiscal measures. I know we will say that there is a fiscal constraint, the fiscal deficit constraint. But I think in a situation like this, where we have not faced a situation like this for more than 10 or 15 years, I think we need to be more relaxed about fiscal deficit. We must step up government expenditure, government investment expenditure, especially on infrastructure. I will give you one example. Rural roads. Even today, after 70 years, 25% of Indian villages do not have access to motorable roads. The Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana did some things nice, but that is not enough. Even today, the situation is pretty bad. Here is a case where you can easily step up investments, where money will go into the hands of the poorest, that is the rural workers, and this is likely to boost demand immediately, and therefore a step up demand for produce of consumer goods, consumer durables, and so on. Therefore, I think if the economy has to be stepped up very quickly, fiscal measures have a far better record than monetary measures.
Right.
So therefore, I would still say that there is a scope for improving public spending, especially public infrastructure investment. That will have far better effect than improving the banking system, which is definitely useful.
Right. All right. Govindraj, let me come to you here, again, before getting the specifics. Your first takeaways, because a couple of points that immediately come to mind here is that a lot of what was announced is more of a sentiment booster. They've tried to play the balance, the fiscal balance as well, to ensure that they don't have to give up too much of their fiscal deficit targets. And a lot of the budget announcements have been rolled back. So, because if we look at what the cries of the industry, the way people were talking about the indicators, they started coming in much before the budget. Despite that, certain announcements were made. So, obviously, the question can also arise whether or not the government chose not to listen to those indicators at that time, or now realized how serious the situation is and hence decided to roll back some of these announcements.
Right. I think so. The word you used, listening, is very critical. If you ask me, I was somehow under the impression, or I got the impression, that the government had completely stopped listening to anyone, and particularly the people in the finance ministry. And now I get a sense that yes, they are listening, because I guess it's tough not to listen. I would add another word of caution. I think people should not react too quickly to these kind of announcements. I mean, I'm already seeing responses saying that this is like a mini budget and this is another generation of reforms. I think we should wait. I think people should at least realize today or now that they should not, fall over each other to heap praises on either the government or the finance minister. I'm not saying don't give them credit for doing what they're doing, but go easy. And because this gives them the wrong feedback. The government will start thinking that, oh, maybe they did all the right things, and therefore let's move on to the next agenda on the item. That's number one. Number two, you're absolutely right. Most of it is rollback, but it is a fact that the financial markets, which is the stock markets, will be happy, because that was a critical area of concern. And the fact that it is a fact that you cannot get away, at least in the last few decades, by imposing such a penalty on foreign institutional investors. And to that extent, I think the fact that we've listened and we've responded is a good sign, at least for the financial markets, and that should stem further drain. In general, I think I would still wait for fine print on some of the areas. I know they've said that they're doing away with angel tax, but this is the third or fourth time they're saying it. Yes. So therefore, if you say that in order to escape from angel tax, I have to get myself registered with the Ministry of Commerce, and then that is a completely different ball game. So I think I really want to wait for the fine print and see how it plays out. This is on let's say on one side. On the other side, I think it's been pointed out, there is a demand problem. I mean, people are not spending. People have lost the propensity to spend. How do you bring that back? None of this really addresses those issues. And maybe in the forthcoming announcements which have been promised, something will be done along those lines.
Right, absolutely. In fact, that is a very key point that you mentioned, the demand problem that probably still needs to be addressed. And of course, the fact that we shouldn't sort of jump the gun. This is a beginning. We can't take that away, but this is still a beginning, and there is much more that perhaps still needs to be done. But let's also bring in Anjan Roy, a senior economist who's also joining us at this point. Thank you so much for joining us. Your reaction to this, and specifically just taking off on the point that Govind was just mentioning about the fact that the demand concerns are still not being met, because we're talking about people not just not buying houses and cars, but now people thinking twice about buying even consumer goods like your biscuits and your soaps and your shampoos. Is that level of is that issue really going to be solved with what was announced today?
Today, what the government has done is to present a business and industry-friendly face. So far, the government has been talking about tax collection and tax payment and all that. Actually, the entire approach from introduction of GST has been tax totalitarianism, in the sense that everything has to be brought within the tax network. I mean, that doesn't work in Indian context, in the sense that there is a very large informal sector which sets the tone of the Indian economy. And if you suddenly want to make everything formal, possibly this is the kind of reaction that happens. Secondly, you will notice that for whole of last year, and if not longer, agricultural or farm prices have been very low. Farm price inflation has been very low. Even during the summer season, which is generally the time when vegetable or potato and all these prices used to go up. I mean, generally the farm prices used to go up. These did not go up. We celebrated that last year. But that also meant that the farm sector was not getting its price. I mean, the income flow into the farm sector was getting lower and lower. As a result, I mean, this is the end result of, say, a couple of years of very low farm level inflation where the farmers are not getting. So hence there is lack of demand in the rural areas. Now, that has to be regenerated again. One doesn't say that there should be the emphasis on inflation targeting. That had a lot to do. It was good. Benign inflation was good, but not to this extent. So that is another aspect which needs to be tackled by intervention in the rural economy, such as infrastructure creation for the rural sector.
Right.
We have not done much about food processing, dispersed food processing development. So these are some of the things which maybe, I mean, could be considered.
Right. Nagaraj, let me come back to you here, you know, just picking up on the point that you were talking about with respect to demand and the point that also was just mentioned, the fact that rural distress, agrarian distress is also another big issue, and that perhaps hasn't been fully, if at all, addressed at all. So these are some issues that really need to be talked about as well. The agenda here for the finance minister's announcements, do you think it's more been to sort of boost sentiment, you know, rather than actually making hardcore commitments towards more spending?
Yes. My first impression is that
not just,
the finance ministers.
Yes, Professor Nagaraj, please go on. Yes.
Hello. Yeah. See, I think it is the finance minister's announcements seem to be more directed towards the stock market and the financial sector, and more towards boosting up the sentiments, which have become very adverse during the last few trading sessions in the stock market. So I think this is more directed towards that than actually addressing the issue of demand. I think that is, I mean, that is what I said previously. Especially rural demand has been in a very bad shape for a long time. Rural distress has been very severe, and that has not been addressed at all in the announcement made today. Surely, the credit growth to rural economy may improve with infusion of capital in the public sector banks, but most of the credit goes to non-agriculture sector. And therefore, agriculture interests have not been yet addressed, and that is the biggest. Let us not forget that 70% of workers or population still lives in rural economy. And therefore, they have to be addressed, and they are under distress. And as the previous speaker said, the agricultural prices have been ruling very low, and therefore, while the government has been announcing minimum support price, but they do not actually reach the farmers. So therefore, the rural purchasing power has been very, very low, and therefore, they cannot purchase goods, even the simple consumer goods.
Right.
And that is the problem. And so far, in finance minister's address, this has not been tackled. So
Yes.
I hope more will come in this direction.
Right. Well, we are expecting more announcements next week as well. We'll, of course, have to wait and watch out for that. But let me also welcome Abhishek Mishra of the BJP, who has also joined us on the panel. Abhishek Mishra, thank you for joining in. You know, of course, we've been talking about the positive points here. A lot, of course, has been said. And a lot has been done as far as boosting the sentiment is concerned. The government is listening. I think that's the biggest takeaway, the big message that has come out from today. But my question to you is slightly different. You know, the fact that several of the budget announcements have been rolled back, Is it that the government wasn't listening before the budget, was not paying attention to the indicators, to the voices across industries that were coming out, and now post several meetings with several stakeholders across industry, realized the gravity of the situation and decided to roll back some of these announcements?
See, Avni, in a previous debate also on the economic issue, I had very clearly said that Honorable Finance Minister has said she listened to all the stakeholders, and whatever she had to understand, finance and policy making is a dynamic process. And many a times, you realize that on the ground currently, this new, there has to be a policy change, and there's nothing wrong in that. It is how the system works. This is how life works, how the dynamics of policy and the financial markets work. And these are market processes, and hence many a time you have to keep, your things have to be changed. So there's nothing problem in that. Now, main issue, Avni, I had said in the previous debate also when Mr. Mohan Goswami, etc., very vociferous, the government is not listening. Government. I had said the Honorable Prime Minister has clearly said that our goal is a $5 trillion economy. The Honorable Finance Minister Sitaraman ji clearly said that any issue, maybe taxation issue, maybe policy issue, maybe issue of how to stimulate the economy. Now today you see, Avni, right from an auto, to saying that yes, the government itself will now start replacing old vehicles. And she said that charity begins from home. So right from starting from an auto to giving what the financial the foreign portfolio investors wanted, the surcharge should be removed on them, which was there was some loss in the share market. So right from repurchasing vehicles in government offices to giving a removal of surcharge of foreign investment the investors. So that is the how the decision making has been so so many things have been taken into place.
Avni, can I come
in
here?
The finance minister today.
Yes, Abhishek Mishra, I understand your point. Abhishek Mishra, I understand your point. I understand what you're saying, absolutely, but there are still, the fact is that many of these decisions have been rolled back, and it's not like the budget was announced 6 months or 1 year ago. It was just announced. So obviously there has been a rethink. Obviously the government has realized the gravity of the situation here. Govind, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think rollback in itself is not a sin. Many governments, previous governments, and finance ministers have done it. But I think it's the nature of the action that was taken first. I cannot understand how that they could have imposed such a tax on foreign portfolio investors, which knowing fully well that this is the reaction that was likely to happen. Now, 22,000 crores worth of shares have been sold by foreign institutional investors between July and August. Now, that's not a small amount. I mean, you see the loss of value. I mean, in the stock markets, it's mind-boggling, and many government officials, including politicians, including bureaucrats, officers, everyone invests in stock markets or have indirect investment stock markets. So you cannot take this constituency lightly, or display such a lack of understanding of it. Is my primary issue here, and therefore I think in going forward and looking at it positively, please pay more attention to issues like investors, investment, and investor sentiment, because that's something that you can always roll back, but there will be a huge loss and people will lose life savings before you. This is not like saying, okay, I will take away GST by so much, and therefore from tomorrow when you buy a car it will be less. Of course, they've not done that, but when you do something in the markets, the damage that you cause is far more, and therefore you should be paying far more attention upfront rather than responding later.
Yes, absolutely. And Abhishek Mishra, I want to come to you for a response there, but let me also bring in Ajay Bagga here. Ajay Bagga, your reaction, of course, is specifically on this point.
Yeah, it's a good point, but I don't agree with the tag that Abhishek Mishra is saying that we have done you a favor. No,
yes,
it was a big mistake. Nobody thought through that you're increasing the surcharge on 5 crore income.
No, Mr.
Abhishek Mishra, can we heard you out? Abhishek Mishra, we heard you out. You can respond. We heard you out.
I never used this word, Avni Raja.
All right, all right.
False wash your mouth.
No, but
I never said we have done you a favor.
All right.
I said it's a dynamic process, policy making, decision making globally. Dynamic process, there are things to take into consideration. We are a sensitive government. We listen to all the stakeholders.
All right, Abhishek Mishra, we get your point.
It's okay. There's nothing wrong. We never said we did a favor. It's a process.
Yes,
Mr. Bagga, take back your word. I never said we did a favor.
Taken,
it's a
Abhishek
dynamic
Mishra.
process.
Abhishek Mishra, point taken. Let's hear out the rest of what Mr. Bagga has to say, and then we'll come back to you for a response. Go ahead, Mr. Bagga.
How it is being viewed positive. The offshore markets rallied after the FM statement. what the market was taking positively, that you have brought economics to the center point, you are addressing issues. Third, there's a lot of hope. The FM said that I'll come back by midweek next week, and once more after that, I've got 2 more sets of reforms. I think all these were huge positives. What could have been avoided? One, something like the CSR, which was put up in Parliament. So did somebody not read it before putting in? 16 other provisions have been moved out that we will not prosecute. It's a very huge positive. I am here to congratulate the government, but I'm not going to sugarcoat my words. That's all I'm saying. 17 lakh crores of market cap has been destroyed. And if we knew that today the FM is going to do a press conference, what business the CEA had yesterday? He gave such a negative statement in the market.
Absolutely.
2.5 lakh crores of market cap were destroyed yesterday. What was the CEA doing yesterday? Teaching us what is capitalism, when the home of capitalism, USA, they bought out all the banks which were going down. They saved their economy in 2008. And he was talking about privatization and socialization of losses. When you give farm loan waivers, aren't you socializing losses? When you let Air India not pay 5,000 crores for 230 days to companies in which we hold shares and which the President of India is the largest shareholder, aren't you socializing those losses? I, as a shareholder of BPCL and HBCL, are paying for the Air India today. They owe 5,000 crores for 230 days. What was the business of the CEA talking like that yesterday when the FM was doing such a brilliant job today? I think those are the questions we have to understand. We have to see what are the unintended consequences. Yes, please tax the rich. 5 crores plus you wanted to put a surcharge, very good. 1,400 crores is the loss of revenue today. That's what the Revenue Secretary said. For that you have lost 25,000 crores going out from FIIs, 17 lakh crores of market cap you have lost. I think that is something. And again, I would read that the Prime Minister said on Independence Day, wealth creation is good. We respect the wealth creators. Today the FM said that again. So whatever the spokespersons might say, I would go by the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, and I would congratulate them.
Right, right. Yes, Abhishek Mishra, nobody is taking away from what has been done today. Nobody is taking away that these announcements were necessary. This is going to be a big sentiment booster. A lot of positives came out from today. But we cannot ignore what has happened in the last few weeks since the budget announcement. The amount of money that has been lost, the amount of wealth that has been eroded, the negative sentiment that has percolated down from the foreign institutional investors to the person who doesn't want to buy 5 rupees gluco biscuit is something that just cannot be ignored.
And all the public sector companies, Avni, are down to historic lows.
Yes.
SAIL has reached a history-to-date low, not a 52-week low. We normally track 52 weeks, so 1 year low we look at. SAIL has reached a historic low. BHEL, BEL, you name any public sector company, where are they? So we have to do a disinvestment program. We need good markets for that. How will we raise 1 lakh crores for our disinvestment program? That is the ground reality. The finance minister has got it. I think what the markets really liked, economy was brought back to the center stage.
Yes, yes, Abhishek Mishra, go ahead. That's really the point. The fact of what has happened
Avni,
cannot
if I
be
can
ignored.
add quickly.
Yes. Yes, Govind, please go ahead before we go to Abhishek Mishra.
No, Avni, I think, I still go back to the point I made earlier. I think everyone, this government, like any government, deserves honest feedback. And I think honest feedback should be given and questions should be raised in a constructive way about mistakes made in the past with an intention to move on positively. And that's why I pointed out again, let's not, keep congratulating the finance minister saying this is a mini budget and this is reform phase number 5 and so on. Give them constructive feedback, let them work on the problem, because all of us in this country have to benefit from a good and a strong economy, including by way of jobs, employment, income generation and so on.
Yes, yes, Abhishek Mishra, please go ahead.
Avni, I wanted to...
Yeah. So now if you see, Avni, what the Honorable Finance Minister said today, she was said for the MSME sector, whatever is a backlog in GST, they will be returned in 30 days, and from now on, within 60 days the money will be returned. At the micro level, at the policy level, at the level where the economy has to regain at the MSC level, at the non-banking financial sector level. So government has understood, government has made a policy, and government has realized that what all we need to give economy a thrust. India today still, despite being a global meltdown, we are still doing well. We are doing better than China today. So Avni, this all kind of gloom and doom, which even Honorable Prime Minister said that the doomsayer naysayers are not required. We have to be optimistic, hopeful, and there was people 1 month back who were saying that no, government is not doing reform, government is not listening to the taxpayer, government is doing tax. Today now, Finance Minister clearly said there will be the taxation system will be changed. It will be faceless. So at the CSR level, everybody was criticizing. Now today, Finance Minister clearly said it will not. We will make it a civil matter. So
no,
every
don't tell
issue
me that,
raised by the industry,
CSR a criminal matter was
and the government has
something that just should not have been done in the first place.
Whatever the markets wanted, industry wanted for as a boost, as we have given. We have given stimulus and every incentive from the to the auto industry, to the MSME industry, to the service industry, whatever was required. We have given a stimulus, we have given a thrust, we have done a duty
yes,
to the government.
Yes, you have, Abhishek Mishra. You have given a sentiment boost.
Feels that, yes,
this is a sentimental boost. This is a sentiment boost more than anything. But like many of our panelists have been pointing out, the core issue here of demand has still not been addressed. People still are scared to go out and buy. Why? Because they are scared of whether or not
the minister clearly says
whether or not they will have jobs tomorrow. That is the point. There has been
government. No, Avni Raja, one second, Professor, one second. Avni Raja, I contest it's not a sentiment boost. Along with sentiment boost, it's a change in the fundamental of the market. We have said in the auto industry that we have clarified a standard. Along with the electric vehicle, the BS6 vehicle will be will run the full course. We are told the government will buy new vehicles. So it's not only merely sentiment boost. It is mainly we have changed the laws even for MSME sector, GST. So we have done everything required. Not only sentiment, procedure, technicality. We are buying. As Sitaraman ji said, we are starting from ourselves. Government is buying.
Can I intervene?
So that the auto, the money will go to the car manufacturer.
All right. Anjan Roy, please go ahead. How would you like to respond to what he said?
See, everything need not be seen from the angle of the market alone.
Yes.
The macroeconomy and that issue has to be addressed.
Exactly.
You cannot raise automobile sector from out of its present problem just by announcing that government is defreezing purchase of vehicles. How many vehicles can the government buy? Because the automobile sector turnover has increased immensely, and what the government should squarely face and also state that automobile sector cannot go on expanding at this breakneck speed. 20%, 36% growth permanently is not possible. Somehow or other, it will slow down, and let us face the fact. For individuals, purchasing a car is a capital investment decision. It depends on the rate of interest, credit flow. Until now, automobile sales were being driven by offer of credit from the NBFCs. Now, ever since the liquidation of, problem with IIFs and other credit flow freezes, automobile sector demand recession was inevitable. So one has to take into account these broader macroeconomic factors also. What is needed is not just government buying vehicles, people buying vehicles.
Yes.
What can happen if you say that we are phasing out BS4? That means people who are buying cars today know that they will not be on roads after a certain period. It will further disincentivize. But these are factors which have to be taken into account. Now, we must also remodel. We cannot have a growth model depending only on one sector like automobile. We have to take up broader activities. For example, infrastructure. When China went into a tailspin, it was much worse than India's current position. We have decelerated from, say, 7% to 6%, which is none too bad for a big economy.
Right.
But even if at 6% we are dissatisfied and our growth rate has to go, we have to take up some other projects.
Yes.
For example, if you are very strict, very conservative on maintaining deficit targets, then you are bound to face this kind of hiccups. At times when the economy is slowing down, you have to be flexible with deficit targets. Maybe at points you will have fiscal slippages also, but that doesn't really matter. So long as you are growing, you will recover by higher revenues from growth. So these are some of the things which must also be kept in mind. Not just talking only about the stock market or value creation or wiping out of value on the stock market.
Right.
This is
yes. All right.
This is the normal course of operation of a stock market.
Yes.
I wanted to...
Yes. Professor Nagaraj, you wanted to come in, and then we'll come to Ajay Bagga as well. Please go ahead.
May I comment? Yes. Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think the macroeconomic picture is something which needs to be taken into account, which is at the moment missing from the Ministry of Finance's announcements today. I think let's not forget the most important factor is between 2011-12 and today, the investment rate in the economy has fallen by 5 to 6 percentage points of GDP. This kind of negative growth in investment rate will definitely affect the overall economic growth, which we are seeing now. Savings rate have fallen correspondingly, and I find that there is not enough appreciation of this long-term negative trends which have got built into the economy. There is a wishful thinking that FDI will come and boost the domestic economy. Nowhere in the world FDI has formed more than 2 to 3% of GDP. So therefore, and in India, the FDI has never formed more than 1.5% of GDP. Therefore, to expect that somehow the foreign money will come and meet the investment demand to take the economy to a $5 trillion economy is just wishful thinking. So therefore, I think let us not forget the macroeconomic picture and especially infrastructure. Railways are crying for investment, but whereas the government is busy trying to think of privatizing it. I think this is a completely mistaken move. I think rail and road, if they are taken care of, and in the rural economy, NREGA has been completely neglected. NREGA was that I'm talking about the MNREGA, right. Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, which boosted rural economy during the last decade, has been completely neglected in the current decade. And we all know the last decade was a period when the agricultural wages went up very much thanks to NREGA. I mean, that is the way you put money into the hands of the poorest of the poor. Therefore, the economy gets a big boost.
Right.
And also, the money gets used for creating productive goods, public goods. So, those aspects are still missing in what the ministry has said. I think there's an urgent need that these issues should be brought. Hopefully, they will bring it out in the next few sessions.
Right. Yes, Ajay Bagga, please go ahead.
I would just like to add to what the two professors said. They know much more of economics than me. You know, there are 4 pillars to any economy. One is exports. We are very poor in exports, and our share of exports is falling because the ease of doing business is so difficult. Our logistics costs are 18% versus a Chinese 8%. Our rate of interest is higher than China. Our infrastructure, you can't compare. China is 6 times our size of economy. So we need a huge boost for exports. Hopefully something will come between Piyush Goyal and Nirmala Sitaraman. They'll work out something. Second big pillar is public infrastructure spending. That has been happening, but that's a drop. At 3 lakh crores, it really, you know, on this scale of a $2.75 trillion economy, it is inadequate. Third is private infrastructure spending, which the Professor Nagaraj just mentioned. That has been falling 2013 was the peak, like our exports peaked in 2014. After that, we've had the same value of exports. They've really not grown in value terms. So private infrastructure is lacking. What was really running this economy was private consumption expenditure. 65% of the economy was that. And as Professor Nagaraj mentioned, the rural wage growth has gone down to 3% over the last 3 years. It's a combination of factors. We can do a special show on agricultural economics. But what you need right now is to put money in people's pockets, especially the 20 crore middle income Indians. You need to give a tax break or something which will kickstart consumption. And Avni, coming back to your point, if you don't know whether your job will stay or not, 10 crore people work in textiles. Textile is in a huge recession. Bangladesh and Vietnam are taking away the jobs. We don't have a package. 10 crore people work in construction. There's nothing that has come up for construction. In fact, today the market was spooked that the PMO has written to the road ministry that your road is costing 25 crores per kilometer and your earnings are 1 crore. We want to stop this whole thing. Roads has a multiplier of 8 times. You build a road, you're creating every road that you're making, it's a multiplying 8 times. That's the kind of, it links up the hinterland. Third big part that we are really lacking today is that other very manual and intensive jobs, like in the auto sector, for example. Auto is 42% of your manufacturing GDP, which has stagnated at 15% of your total GDP. We are good in services, we have not grown in manufacturing, and auto is 42% of that. That if it degrows by 30%, you are crying for a package for that sector. Otherwise, you're going to just kill a lot of employment. It's a high frequency indicator. Right. Without it going ahead, you're not going ahead. So I think those are the few things that have to be addressed. Yeah. Out of the 4 pillars, I think a few of them were addressed today, but we are looking forward with hope that
there's still more that needs
for
to be
the
done.
Next 2 announcements, maybe something will come for the consumer.
Yeah. Avni, can I come in?
Yes, please go ahead, Govind.
Avni, I wanted to...
Yes, let Govind first,
Avni,
then we'll go to Professor
I think all
Agarwal.
the tangibles have been I think the tangibles have been pretty well outlined by my other panelists, including Ajay Baga. I think it's the intangibles in which, the way I argue, would matter more at this point of time. I think the question to ask is, why is business not investing, right? So we know the tangible reasons. The balance sheets are in stress. There is a global economy slowdown. You're not sure about whether if you create capacity, it will get consumed. But in general, why is business not investing? And that's a question I'm posing. I'm not saying right now if I have the answer. Secondly, why is the consumer not spending? Why is propensity to spend coming down and diminishing by the day? That's why you see a drop in spending across the spectrum, from cars to biscuits and soaps. So I think these are the questions to ask, and the answers to these questions do not come very easily. If you do all of the above, which is that was mentioned by my earlier panelists, and then you need something else. I mean, you need to bring confidence back into people, businesses, enterprises, that you can spend, you can invest, you can create, you can set up industry. You will not be harassed. You will be treated well, and you can have some material consumption and enjoy the benefits of material consumption. I mean, that needs to come back. I don't think that is there today, and therefore I would argue that in addition to all of that, it's the intangible that is going to matter a lot, and that's something that the government should pay attention on, not to be fixed next week, because it cannot be, but over time.
Absolutely, completely agree with you there, Govind, because there are a lot of issues, like I was pointing out. If there is inherent insecurity of whether or not I'm going to have a job tomorrow, whether or not when I pass out of college, will I get a job? If those inherent insecurities are not addressed, then there's no question of spending. People are just going to hold on to whatever they have and not even spend, forget about discretionary, even cut down on basics, which is what's really happening at this point. Professor Agarwal, please go ahead.
Yeah, Avni, there are 2-3 points here. One is that when you already talked about jobs, but then creating jobs is difficult in the kind of scenario which we're looking at. So that's where what I've been suggesting is that they need to be given job-based tax incentives to the corporates, where they come out to the fact that how many jobs they're giving, and then give it. Any fiscal spending as of today should not be done the way it has done in 2011-12, the way the costs were raised for the farmers and all, by just distributing largesse and creating distortions in the economic markets, by giving loans which were being taken and waived off, about 5 to 5.5 lakh crore of loan waving appetite this country had in the previous governments for last couple of years? Are we looking of creating another level of NPAs which the corporates were living on in terms of financing and making this country grow? I think the government is not looking at that, and I think that should be brought to a stop as it has been done rightly. It's a question of creating those jobs. If we see jobs come up, if we see people employed, the government machinery itself has about 55% of vacancies which have not been filled in the last 3-4 years. They need to fill those vacancies. Large number of pension disbursements have not taken place. They need to be dispersed. As soon as the pension disbursements take place, we'll see some consumption growth take place immediately.
Right.
And we have seen that happen with various pay commissions coming in time to time, that whenever a pay commission comes in, the government sector goes about spending, whether it is in real estate, automobile, other components as well. So the key critical area which has to be there is development, but with jobs. If the government brings out policy framework, even if it is distributing fiscal spendings, which has to be there, it has to be linked with jobs. It is not supposed to be going out just as free, which was done literally in Manrega. And I have seen people who have had farmlands, who are working in cities here, who cried that they are not getting any more farmers because those farmers are sitting comfortably, landless laborers are sitting comfortably, saying that we are getting free money from Manrega. Why should I work on the farmland? I'm sorry. That kind of distribution, NPS, 100, 200, about 1 lakh crore being waived every year. Are we looking at that kind of distribution to the industry again?
Take your point that there does in fact need to be something that needs to be done as far as jobs are concerned. Probably look at another unique ways of sort of creating jobs. But I'm afraid we've run out of time. I'd like to thank all my panelists for joining us on this extremely crucial discussion. But the key questions here that we are left with, this is not to take away from what was announced. There were some very important announcements that came our way today. The much needed sentiment boost, the much needed messaging that the government is in fact listening. But like always, it is always important to question. It is always important to look between the lines and read between the lines and read the fine print. But the question here is that there are still areas that have not been addressed. You can put in as much money as you want into the banking system. You can give the public sector banks money, but if nobody wants to take a loan, what point is that money? If nobody wants to buy a car, what point is the money what point is the transmission of interest rates? If that basic fear of not having a job, if that basic fear of not getting a job when you graduate is there, then where is the question of anything else? Where is the question of incentivizing, of getting back demand? The issue of demand, the issue of rural demand, the issue of agrarian distress, these are all extremely, extremely important issues. And the most important issue of all is jobs. Where are the jobs? There is nothing that we have heard as yet that gives us the confidence that jobs will be there for everyone, that jobs will be there for those who graduate, that people who are working today are not going to lose their jobs. And it is only then that people will get the confidence that I can go out and spend, I can buy something discretionary, I can buy more of something that is a necessity. So these are some of the extremely important questions that we still need to look at, that we still need to question and ask and talk about. Thank you so much for watching.